welcome. This is the second time I'm doing a video idea like this, and I'm doing it in the dark this time. As you can see, I'm in the dark, and hopefully, hopefully that will make this a lot spookier. I don't know. I'm gonna put my hair up. Alrighty, that's better. So today we have an author that I recently learned of this year, and I started reading this year. Jean Ray. Well, that's just his alias. He went by a lot of aliases. I don't remember his real name, but he wrote some spooky stories. He's known as the Belgian Poe. So, yeah. I'll just get into it. Starting with the story, The Last Guest. In his checkered cap and worn overcoat, John was no longer the stately waiter of the Ocean Queen Hotel. He had become once more, for the 7 months that the bathing season lay dead, the humble hardware clerk of Mercy Street in Hull. Mr. Buttercup, the hotel's proprietor, extended a friendly hand. "See you next year, John, old chap. I plan to reopen the place on May 15th. "God willing, yes," said John, and he emptied the farewell whiskey his boss had just poured him with excessive gravity. The disgruntled groan of high tide filled the air, which was dull with low-hanging fog. "The season is truly over," said John. "We are the last, very last," added Mr. Buttercup. A dozen silhouettes bent beneath the shapeless burdens trudged along the coastline, which seemed to link the Chinese-style roof of the microscopic depot to the dike, tiled like a Dutch kitchen. "The stalkers are leaving," said John. "The lighthouse keeper told them there would be snow today." "Snow," said Mr. Buttercup indignantly. "Why the fuck are there always so many people? It doesn't make sense to me." "Snow," said Mr. Buttercup indignantly, "and here we are hardly into October." John studied the sky, oxidized by salt spray, where flights of waiting birds filed by in mournful procession. Oh wow, it's a lot harder to read like this than I thought, but spooky. "They are leaving the marshes," he said. "It's not good when they do that." A pure white bird flew by in a ball of fury. "Snow, snow!" it cried. "Did you hear that?" asked John. He wanted to laugh. "It's only snow, and we have seen the snow," said Mr. Buttercup. Then he added philosophically, "And what am I to do after all? The movers come tomorrow to pick up the furniture that will not overwinter here, and the day after I shall be in London." John sought in turn for something to lessen his employer's loneliness, but he did not succeed. "It does what it will," he concluded after pondering a moment in vain. In the distance, a hammer played feverishly over boards. "My word," marveled Mr. Buttercup, "there goes Windegree leaving too. Listen to how they nail down the shutters of his villa." "But then," remarked John, "you will be alone, absolutely alone. Once the last train departs, the station master goes down to the village." Mr. Buttercup gave a start. Alone. "This is what I get for spending this season in some new eastern den," he grumbled, "instead of settling in Margate or Folkestone. "The business was not so bad," protested John gently, patting the pocket where his wallet slumbered. No, conceded Mr. Buttercup. A locomotive whistled beyond the horizon, its wail thin as a wire. Here comes the train, said John. I must go. Farewell, Mr. Buttercup. Oh, you still have time for some whiskey. One last glass, then, Mr. Buttercup. At my age, one does not run after the train. Mr. Buttercup was left alone. In the dark, empty hall. The hammer no longer sounded beyond the road. He watched joylessly as the sand castles that Stalker's children built that morning slowly melted beneath the rising tide on the empty and windswept beach. Feeny, Feeny, screeched a whirling snipe, fleeing from a nearby pond. The season, completed Mr. Buttercup, who wanted to show the 12 rattan armchairs he still had the heart for pleasantries. But neither the snipe nor the 12 armchairs had a care for the valiant state of his soul. Just then, he saw a man running desperately up the coast by the station. The call of the locomotive whipped him along. He ran even faster, gesturing like an unhappy puppet. Mr. Buttercup chuckled with glee. Mr. Windgary missed the train, he said. Ha, that's a good one. The ringing phone snatched away this bourgeois joy. It was an employee from the power plant who advised him they were about to cut the power. Fucking gross. Fuck off. I will fucking ban you from this channel if you bring that fucking religious bullshit in here. Goddamn. The ringing phone snatched away this bourgeois joy. It was an employee from the power plant who advised him they were about to cut the power, given that the season was over. But I'm still here all by myself, protested Mr. Buttercup. Then you will carry on the season all by yourself, the voice of the employee. I do what I will, said the innkeeper, losing his temper. Sure, and so do we. It would be stupid. It would be stupid, huh, not to leave a dynamo running for your flashlight. Flashlight! Flashlight! Yelled Mr. Buttercup, who had hung garlands of light in the dining room. Hey, yes, a flashlight, you dotard. Another voice joined their conversation, that of the station master. Hello, hello, telephone communications are ending. We need to close the station, the telegraph office. He wants to cut the power, raged Mr. Buttercup. It's all the same to me, growled the railman. No one is on night shift here, and the station will be lit with acetylene. So let's go. I'm cutting out, too. Mr. Buttercup lost some of the fine decorum appropriate to an innkeeper, and he compared his two interlocutors to sanitary utensils. Mister, shouted the station master, you dare to insult a civil servant, you, a hot water peddler. Fish, salt cod, eel bait, added the electrician, who spent his Sundays fishing. A captious dictionary, dark with invective, was thus compiled from one end of the wire to the other. Then the two employees began in unison to invite Mr. Buttercup to vacate those maritime locales for London or for hell, if he did not wish to see his white flannel trousers kicked by heavy boots. Well, let's see. Hide user from this channel. Bye, bitch. The unfortunate fellow next heard the electrician propose to the railman that he fire up a special train to bring along a few suitable instruments for cutting this low-life innkeeper down to size. Then, the station master vigorously expressed his regret at having no rolling stock at his disposal. Finally, the pair agreed on an appointment in the near future, at a friendly inn where one could find good ale, marvelous whiskey, and plenty of fried fish. Mr. Buttercup plucked up one of a pair of green staring candles that decorated the patio, improvised a candle holder from a lemonade bottle, and sadly poured himself a glass of whiskey. A pale mother of pearl rosary ticked off the final fingers of light in the west. Fucking. How do I turn chat off? I'm so sick of these idiots. I can't. I should have done that when I started the chat. I started the stream. Oh well. From the hollows of dunes and scraps of fog, the shadows raised high faithful temples. I fucking love that word. I need to write that down. High faithful. Fuck yeah. Okay. The green candle's flame flickered. Fun. So immersive. It's okay. The green candle's flame flickered from corner to corner, its tip revealing the most dreadful shadows as they stealthily settled into the lobby. Then someone opened the door, and with a sigh plopped into one of the rattan armchairs. Mr. Buttercup regarded the man incredulously. At first he mistook the fellow for one of the shadows that now moved unhindered around the empty lobby, but a new and more painful sigh confirmed it was a man who had commandeered the armchair. The candle only extended his sight a couple of feet. "Mr. Wingery!" exclaimed the proprietor, suddenly at ease. "Well, this comes as a surprise." He had forgotten the correct and obscenious language for the model innkeeper. "I saw you headed to the station." "I missed the train," gasped the man. "You ran well, though. I saw you. My God, how out of breath you are." "My chest," wheezed the man. "Very bad. Lungs seized up. Just try to leave. Snow." "Again? But it's not going to snow, I tell you myself." In response, Mr. Wingery snatched a translucent hand toward the darkened windows, and the innkeeper saw fresh little flakes fluttering in the night. "Bah!" he muttered. "Bah, and then what?" "Not good for me," complained the sick man. "I will guide you back home," said Mr. Buttercup. The other man shook his head. "No use. Everything in the villa is empty or locked up. I'll stay here if you have a room and a little hot tea. But of course," Mr. Buttercup hastened to add, returning to his professional role as host, "would you like supper? There is yet some cold beef, a slice of pate, tinned fish, and as much cheese as you might like." "Thank you, just scalding hot tea and 2 drops of old rum if you don't mind." "This gives me some company," said Mr. Buttercup cheerfully. "Did you know I was all alone in this resort, with everyone gone? You are the last. To have no one to talk to on an October night, with the sea lowing 100 paces away and the trumpeting of wild geese as the only living voices around you. This is truly the worst punishment for an honorable man." But his companion remained as morose as the night itself. Mr. Buttercup watched in fright as his handkerchief blushed with thick gobs of spittle. Only in the candle's dwindling light, it seemed dark as shoe polish, and that much uglier. After groaning his good night, he ascended to his room, grasping the last of the green spiraled candlesticks. It trembled like a storm lantern in the hands of a drunken hillet. Mr. Buttercup remained more alone than ever. Before him the tapering flame burned at the rim of the bottle's neck. He gulped the bitter whiskey but found no savor in it. Occasionally he cast angry looks at the wicker chairs where he thought he saw the station master lounging. But there was nothing in that place except an empty armchair, some tormented shadows, and the trembling reflection of the snow that was whitening the darkness. Mr. Buttercup awoke to millipedes of horror crawling across his flesh, but he had no idea why. The snow-felted night was silent and lunar, though. As he was falling asleep, he had grumbled about Wingary's gravelly cough, but he no longer heard it. He is sleeping, he told himself, but he could not explain the instinct that made him curl tightly within the warm cavern of his blankets. The twilight, with its patrolling shadows, should have seemed more hostile to anyone than the night itself. So silent and splendidly clear, yet Mr. Buttercup had felt no fear. Now, however, in a thin, reedy voice he whimpered, "Come now, what's all this then?" Nothing was happening. The moonlight underscored the silence, and that was all. "What can it be?" repeated the nagging voice inside his head. But just at that moment the answer came, from the depths of the motionless night. It came as a heavy sound with no echo, the tread of leaden soles, for the steps rang throughout the house and filled it with a dark and monotonous murmur. "Mr. Wingary, Mr. Wingary," called Mr. Buttercup. Only the implacable footsteps echoed his cry. They seemed to leave the lobby and continue relentlessly down the stairs. The innkeeper haphazardly threw on some mismatched clothes. Once more he reacted against a nameless terror, which approached him in a dismal tide. He joked foolishly, "Well, I cannot complain about the lack of company. First I was alone, then came Mr. Wingary, and now here comes another guest." He leaned over the railing, but saw nothing, even though the stairwell decanted its delicate silver glow. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. "Hey!" blurted out Mr. Buttercup. Mr. Last Guest, show yourself a bit." But his voice emerged from his trembling lips, thinner than a baby's hair, reaching only a tiny sliver of air. He fell silent, and did not even call for Mr. Wingary. He ventured the descent instead. The stairs echoed in the hall now and then, though Mr. Buttercup heard neither opening doors nor squealing locks. They lost themselves in the depths of the cellars. What later seemed unusual to the innkeeper was that he never thought to arm himself with a weapon. The steps faded out, and the silence gave him the courage for a cautious descent. He took such elaborate precautions that he seemed to have become a thief in his own home. The door to Mr. Wingary's room was not bolted, despite the triple notice to "bolt your door at night," so he could open without any noise. The moonlight allowed Mr. Buttercup to recognize immediately that something dramatic and dreary reigned in that room. Mr. Wingary lay on the bed, head sunk deep in the pillow, his dark mouth open in an audible cry that seemed to go on forever, his open eyes reflecting the blue light from the window. "Dead," stammered Mr. Buttercup. "Dead! Lord, what a story!" 2 seconds later he fled headlong toward the upper floors. The steps had suddenly crossed the lobby and were ascending the stairs. If a scientist were one day to explain to Mr. Buttercup that this was the moment when some sixth sense akin to the infallible preservation instinct of animals had seized upon his entire being, it is a good bet that his reply would be a rather pained and incredulous shrug. Yet one thing is certain. Mr. Buttercup fled like prey in absolute terror. Since the first minutes, the shrill little voice of human logic had refrained from counseling him toward an unarmed ambush from some shadowy corner. The imperious instinct resounded in his soul. "You must flee. Against that you are powerless, superhumanly powerless." Mr. Buttercup had just reached the attic levels reserved for staff and deliverymen. He tripped over a surreptitious mess left by some disgruntled housekeeper. The footsteps moved from room to room now, as if conducting a methodical tour of inspection. "He is in 12, whispered the innkeeper, "and now in 18, 22, 29. Lord, he is in my room. It froze his heart to know the unknown that walked in the night now moved among the familiar and personal items he had just left behind, as if a bit of his being still adhered to the objects in that room. In the last of the maid's garrets, he noticed a plaster holy water font and a sprig of consecrated boxwood standing against the partition. He had a wild idea then. As quietly as he could, he piled some small pieces of furniture across the corridor and crowned the meager barricade with the still damp basin and the withered twig. He has to pass through here, he whispered, and then Mr. Buttercup would have been embarrassed if he had to explain the personality of this he. He had time for neither reflection nor reason, however. The steps beat heavily upon the bare stairs that led to his retreat. Never had the noise sounded more dismal or more fierce. It seemed as if the entire building screamed in fear. Higher up, then, groaned the unfortunate fugitive. He arrived at the lofts, empty and echoing, their creaking floor clad entirely in coarse sheets of moonlight. Mr. Buttercup looked about with haunted eyes. Were these vacant polyhedra sparsely occupied with dust and the webs of shriveled spiders to provide the wretched scenery of his death throes? Suddenly he touched a thin metal ladder. The Belvedere! He rushed to it. The hatch in the ceiling shook, but its hinges welded shut with rust and grime and would not open. The floor of the attic corridor echoed as the steps advanced past his pitiful barricade. Even that does not stop him, cried the innkeeper, and with a desperate thrush that bruised his head and shoulders, he pushed open the fractious hatch onto the great blue night, quilted with snow and studded with diamond stars. The Belvedere was a broad platform with a commanding view of its surroundings. Mr. Buttercup had never ventured out here before. Even standing on a chair, he felt the vertigo come and go in waves. I'd rather leap from here, he cried out, than let that come any closer. He walked across the thick cushions of snow to the outermost edge, a feeling of immense desolation gripping his heart. Far off, two lights followed each other along the dark path to the sea, and the yellow eye of the pier stared insolently from the deepest darkness. Yes, I would rather, sobbed the good fellow. The screech of weathered iron startled him. It came from the ladder's rusty rungs. It came close, ever closer, and had reached the trap door. Mr. Buttercup saw before him then the long, sturdy lightning rod glowing gently in the moonlight. Grasping this with a horrified gasp, he stepped over the outer railing, and with the final cry of the damned, he let himself slide into the void. Something leapt onto the platform. The palest of flares licked at the horizon. At the bottom of the cinder-strewn railway cut, a green lantern lit. The windows of the little station whitened beneath the icy light of an acetylene torch, and the first train whistled lazily in the invisible distance. Mr. Buttercup left the pile of creosote-coated railway ties that served him all night for shelter, and with creaking bones, bloodied hands, and maddened brain, he walked to the tiny station, illuminated and inhabited, which seemed to him the most desirable oasis in the world. It was only 11 o'clock in the morning, so after humbling himself and making peace with the station master, after hearing the opinion of the doctor who arrived by bicycle from a nearby village, that Mr. Wingery had died a clean death by consumption, Mr. Buttercup decided to inspect the hotel. He found nothing suspicious and had already begun to blame loneliness, fear, and whiskey when he arrived at the platform of the Belvedere. Like any good Englishman, or any citizen of the rest of the world. He had read Robinson Crusoe, but he never considered that his panicked retreat had repeated the action of that famous lone mariner who discovered one morning on the beach of the island a single ominous footprint. Now, beside his own footprints, faithfully pressed in the snow's fresh plaster, Mr. Buttercup had just seen a pair of inexplicable tracks, impossibly hideous and huge, so very huge, and these two reached the far edge of the platform, though they did not return. As if the monstrous thing that walked in the night had soared off from there. Going back down the hall, Mr. Buttercup uttered cries of joy upon observing the ritual of the somber hearse, which came to carry off the remains of poor Mr. Wingery. He kept the sullen drivers there through the power of whiskey and amusing anecdotes, right up until the arrival of the mover's van, and he promised the latter such a tip everything was loaded an hour before the last train left, that these worthy fellows nearly broke everything, including their own limbs, in their hurried effort. But an hour before the last train whistled, Mr. Buttercup stood on the station platform. He had brought 2 bottles of whiskey for the master, who helped him board the train with the tenderness of a brother, and waved farewell right until the train became no more than a tiny black lizard on the horizon. It's a stupid fucking dog picture for a profile. Well, what is this even gonna do? Nothing. That's crazy. Oh, neat. Cute. Why not? I mean, fucking whatever, mate. Sure, why not? I'll have 2 pairs of eyes for this now or something. I don't know. Goddamn fucking cringe shit or whatever. At the long table of the Silver Dragon, a handsome and respectable tavern on Richmond Road, where Mr. Buttercup had just told his story, he called for cards, dice, and checkers. It's what one calls suggestion or auto-suggestion, said Mr. Chickenbread, who sells musical instruments in his spacious shop next door. An hallucination, retorted Bitterstone, whose line was oils and press cake. Press cakes. Mr. Buttercup scratched at his voracious face. One is not subject to hallucinations, he shot back, offended, when one's name is Buttercup. He thought the other had said something more or less pejorative about the honorable name of his ancestors when he added smugly, and when one is the proprietor of the Ocean Queen Hotel. Dice rattled, flies specked in yellowed bones, decreeing gains and losses all around. White discs melted under the dark advance of black over the neutral tiles of the checkerboard. A doubled pawn isolated itself dangerously in an enameled no-man's land. Only old Dr. Hellermund remained pensive. I know, he murmured, speaking more to himself than the placid Buttercup. I know the sound of those footsteps. For years I have been the hospital's doctor of internal medicine. I heard it often during those empty nights when nothing stirred the air except formaldehyde vapors and whimpers of pain. It turned heavily in the ruddy shadow of the smoke absorbers. It sounded without echo in the long corridors sparsely starred with night lights. It preceded night orderlies who bore their stretchers down to the morgue, chilled by cool breezes and running water. We heard it, but there existed between us all, doctors, nurses, and administrators, an unspoken agreement never to mention it. Sometimes a novice whispered his prayer with his voice too loud, but each time we heard that sound, we knew that an empty space had opened amidst the sorrowful lives of those painfully clean rooms. When the somber sergeants of Newgate Prison prepare for the arrival of the dawn, they hear it coming down the stone corridors in the background, the black flag barred with a capital N, walking toward one cell more sinister than all the other cells. Dr. Hellerman fell silent and took a personal interest in the checkerboard, that bright ocean where by minute the flimsy rafts of pawns and the battleships of queens all wrecked. So that's that story. I remember when I first read that one, it freaked me the fuck out, and I mean, honestly, right now I'm kind of unsettled, but maybe that's just because the lights are off, you know? Maybe it's just because the lights are off, that might be it. Wow, that's neat. Fine, I guess we'll do that though. We'll do this now for some reason. Sure, why not? I mean, it's spooky, I guess. I don't know. What the fuck do you? Uh, wow, that's crazy. That's that's something. That's something, all right. Kind of like it actually. I'm gonna fucking keep it just to fucking I don't know. Sadly, the light's gonna have to come on for this next story. I cannot read this text. But the next story I picked out for me to narrate to you, is another M.R. James story, like last time I did this. This one is, it's one of my, maybe it's like my fifth favorite of his stories. And, yeah. Just gonna have to bear with me here for like the beginning of it though, because there's Latin. And it will get translated, but I'm not going to translate it until the story does, so don't fucking bother me about it. You bastards. Fucking cunt wipes. The Treasure of Abbot Thomas. 1. Verum esque in presentum diem multa geriunt inter si canisi diabscondito quodam istius abitus tame thesaureo quiem sepe quanquam ad hoc in casium quae vesiverunt stein filnes ipsum inem tomam ad hoc Florida in etete existentum in gentem ore massum circa monasterium defadis prohibibent, de quo multotes interrogatus ubi esset, cum risu respondere solitus erit, Job Johannes et Zacharias vel vobis vel posteris indicabunt idemque aliquando adiciere si inventores minime in visorum inter alia huius habitus apra hoc memoria precipiu dignum idicio quod fenestrum magnum in orientale parte alle australis in ecclesia sua imaginibus optime in vitro depictus implaverit, id quod et ipsisis effigies et insignia ibidem positit, posita demonstrant, domum quoquam abaculum, ferum totum resquarvit, putio in atrio ipsis effaso, et lapibus marmoriis pulchre celatis exornato, decessit autum morte aliquantulum subitine perculisis, etius anno 72 incarcerationis vero Dominisque 1529. I suppose I shall have to translate this, said the antiquary to himself as he finished copying the above lines from that rather rare and exceedingly diffuse book, the Certum Stenfoundus Nobertium. Well, it may well as be done first as last, and accordingly the following rendering was very quickly produced. Up to the present day there is much gossip among the canons about a certain hidden treasure of this Abbot Thomas, for which those of Steinfeld have often made search, though hitherto in vain. The story is that Thomas, while yet in the vigor of life, concealed a very large quantity of gold somewhere in the monastery. He was often asked where it was, and always answered with a laugh, Job, John, and Zechariah will tell either you or your successors. He sometimes added that he should feel no grudge against those who might find it. Among other works carried out by this abbot, I may specially mention his filling the great window at the east end of the south aisle of the church, with figures admirably painted on glass, as his effigy and arms in the window attest. He also restored almost the whole of the abbot's lodging, and dug a well in the court of it, which he adorned with beautiful carvings in marble. He died rather suddenly in the 72nd year of his age, A.D. 1529. The object which the antiquary had before him at the moment was that of tracing the whereabouts of the painted windows of the Abbey Church of Steinfeld. Shortly after the Revolution, a very large quantity of painted glass made its way from the dissolved abbeys of Germany and Belgium to this country, and may now be seen adorning various of our parish churches, cathedrals, and private chapels. Steinfeld Abbey was among the most considerable of these involuntary contributors to our artistic possessions. I am quoting the somewhat ponderous preamble of the book which the antiquary wrote, and the greater part of the glass from that institution can be identified without much difficulty by help either of the numerous inscriptions in which the place is mentioned, or of the subjects of the windows, in which several well-defined cycles or narratives were represented. The story with which I begin my story had set the antiquary on the track of another identification. In a private chapel, no matter where, he had seen 3 large figures, each occupying a whole light in a window, and evidently the work of one artist. Their style made it plain that the artist had been a German of the 16th century, but hitherto the more exact localizing of them had been a puzzle. They represented, will you be surprised to hear it, Job Patriarcha, Johannes Evangelista, Zacharias Propheta, and each of them held a book or scroll, inscribed with a sentence from his writings. These, as a matter of course, the antiquary had noted, and had been struck by the curious way in which they differed from any text of the Vulgate that he had been able to examine. Thus, the scroll in Job's hand, was inscribed, Oro et locis in quo absconditur, for conflatur, which, I don't think they're going to translate this, so Oro est locus in quo absconditur, I think there is a place where gold is hidden, basically. On the Book of John was habet in vestimentis suis scripturam quam nemo novit. For in vestimento scriptum, the following words being taken from another verse. And habet in vestimentis suis scripturam quam nemo novit, that is, they have their raiment, they have on their raiment a writing which no man knoweth. Something like that. And Zacharias had super lapidum unum septem oculi sunt, which alone of the three presents an unaltered text. And super lapidum unum septem oculi sunt, upon one stone are 7 eyes, I'm pretty sure. A sad perplexity it had been to our investigator to think why these three personages should have been placed together in one window. There was no bond of connection between them, either historic, symbolic, or doctrinal, and he could only suppose that they must have formed part of a very large series of prophets and apostles, which might have filled, say, all the cleisatory windows of some captia of some capacious church. But the passage from the sternum had altered the situation by showing that the names of the actual personages represented in the glass now in Lord D's chapel had been constantly on the lips of Abbot Thomas von Eschenhausen of Steinfeld, and that this abbot had put up a painted window, probably about the year 1520, in the south aisle of his abbey church. It was no very wild conjecture that the three figures might have formed part of Abbot Thomas's offering. It was one which, moreover, could probably be confirmed or set aside by another careful examination of the glass, and as Mr. Somerton was a man of leisure, he set out on a pilgrimage to the private chapel with very little delay. His conjecture was confirmed to the full. Not only did the style and technique of the glass suit perfectly with the date and place required, but in another window of the chapel he found some glass, known to have been brought along with the figures, which contained the arms of Abbot Thomas von Eschenhausen. At intervals during his researches, Mr. Somerton had been haunted by the recollection of the gossip about the hidden treasure, and, as he thought the matter over, it became more and more obvious to him that if the abbot meant anything by the enigmatical answer which he gave to his questioners, he must have meant that the secret was to be found somewhere in the window he had placed in the abbey church. It was undeniable, furthermore, that the first of the curiously selected texts on the scrolls in the window might be taken to have a reference to hidden treasure. Every feature, therefore, or mark which could possibly assist in elucidating the riddle he felt sure the abbot had set to posterity, he noted with scrupulous care, and, returning to his Berkshire manor house, consumed many a pint of the midnight oil over his tracings and sketches. After 2 or 3 weeks, a day came when Mr. Somerton announced to his man that he must pack his own and his master's things for a short journey abroad, whither for the moment we will not follow him. Hmm. Why not? I mean, fucking. Whatever. I'm done with that. Back to the fucking story, why don't we? I mean, let's just put it on this one because it's spooky, kind of. I mean. Two. All these people joining and leaving. I mean, fine. The fuck am I even. What is that? I swear I'm fucking hearing something. Oh yeah, look at this little cute thing. It even gives off light. But sadly, it's not enough. I would have used this to read by if it was brighter. Because it's a little pumpkin. It's cute. Something doesn't seem right. 2. Mr. Gregory, the rector of Perspbury, had strolled out before breakfast, it being a fine autumn morning, as far as the gate of his cottage carriage drive, with intent to meet the postman and sniff the cool air. Nor was he disappointed of either purpose. Before he had had time to answer more than 10 or 11 of the miscellaneous questions propounded to him in the lightness of their hearts by his young offspring who had accompanied him, the postman was seen approaching, and among the morning's budget was one letter bearing a foreign postmark and stamp, which became at once the objects of an eager competition among the youthful Gregorys, and was addressed in an uneducated but plainly in English hand. When the rector opened it and turned to the signature, he realized that it came from the confidential valet of his friend and squire, Mr. Somerton. Thus it ran: Honored Sir, as I am in a great anxiety about master, I write at his wish to beg you, sir, if you could be so good as step over. Master has had a nasty shock and keeps his bed. I never have known him like this, but no wonder, and nothing will serve but you, sir. Master says what I mention the short way here is drive to Coblentz and take a trap. Hoping I have made all plain, but am much confused in myself with anxiety and wakefulness at night. If I might be so bold, sir, it will be a pleasure to see an honest brish face among all these forig ones. I am, sir, your obedient servant, William Brown. P.S. The village for town I will not term. It is named Steenfeld. The reader must be left to picture to himself in detail the surprise, confusion, and hurry of preparation into which the receipt of such a letter would be likely to plunge a quiet Berkshire parsonage in the year of grace 1859. It is enough for me to say that a train to town was caught in the course of the day, and that Mr. Gregory was able to secure a cabin in Antwerp, but in the Antwerp boat, and a place in the Coblentz train. Nor was it difficult to manage the transit from that centre to Steinfeld. I labor under a great disadvantage as narrator of this story, in that I have never actually visited Steinfeld myself, and that neither of the principal actors in the episode, from whom I derive my information, was able to give me anything but a vague and rather dismal idea of its appearance. I gather that it is a small place, with large church despoiled of its ancient fittings, a number of rather ruinous great buildings, mostly of the 17th century, surround this church, for the abbey, in common with most of those on the continent, was rebuilt in a luxurious fashion by its inhabitants. At that period, it has not seemed to me worthwhile to lavish money on a visit to the place, for though it is probably far more attractive than either Mr. Somerton or Mr. Gregory thought it, there is evidently little, if anything, of first-rate interest to be seen, except perhaps one thing, which I should not care to see. The inn where the English gentleman and his servant were lodged is or was the only possible one in the village. Mr. Gregory was taken to it at once by his driver, and found Mr. Brown waiting at the door. Mr. Brown, a model, when in his Berkshire home of the impassive whiskered race who are known as confidential valets, was now egregiously out of his element in a light tweed suit, anxious, a most irritable, and plainly anything but master of the situation. His relief at the sight of the honest British face of his rector was unmeasured, but words to describe it were denied him. He could only say, "Well, I am pleased. I'm sure, sir, to see you, and so I'm sure, sir, will master." "How is your master, Brown?" Mr. Gregory eagerly put in. "I think he's better, sir, thank you, but he's had a dreadful time of it. I hope he's getting some sleep now, but what has been the matter? I couldn't make out from your letter. Was it an accident of some kind?" "Well, sir, I hardly know whether I'd better speak about it. Master was very particular. He should be the one to tell you. But there's no bones broke. That's one thing I'm sure we ought to be thankful. What does the doctor say?" asked Mr. Gregory. They were by this time outside Mr. Somerton's bedroom door, and speaking in low tones. Mr. Gregory, who happened to be in front, was feeling for the handle, and chanced to run his fingers over the panels. Before Brown could answer, there was a terrible cry from within the room. "In God's name, who is that?" were the first words he heard. "Brown, is it?" "Yes, sir. Me, sir, and Mr. Gregory," Brown hastened to answer, and there was an audible groan of relief in reply. They entered the room, which was darkened against the afternoon sun, and Mr. Gregory saw with a shock of pity how drawn, how damp with drops of fear, was the usually calm face of his friend, who, sitting upon the curtained bed, stretched out a shaking hand to welcome him. "Better for seeing you, my dear Gregory," was the reply to the rector's first question, and it was palpably true. After 5 minutes of conversation, Mr. Somerton was more his own man, Brown afterwards reported, than he had been for days. He was able to eat more than a respectable dinner, and talked confidently of being fit to stand a journey to Coblentz within 24 hours. "But there's one thing," he said, with a return of agitation which Mr. Gregory did not like to see, "which I must beg you to do for me, my dear Gregory. Don't," he went on, laying his hand on Gregory's to forestall any interruption, "don't ask me what it is or why I want it done. I'm not up to explaining it yet. It would throw me back, undo all the good you have done me by coming. The only word I will say about it is that you run no risk whatever by doing it, and that Brown can and will show you tomorrow what it is. It's merely to put back, to keep something. No, I can't speak of it yet. Do you mind calling Brown?" "Well, Somerton," said Mr. Gregory, as he crossed the room to the door, "I won't ask for any explanations till you see fit to give them, and if this bit of business is as easy as you represent it to be, I will very gladly undertake it for you the first thing in the morning." "I was sure you would, my dear Gregory. I was certain I could rely on you. I shall owe you more thanks than I can tell. Now, here is Brown. Brown, one word with you." "Shall I go?" interjected Mr. Gregory. "Not at all. Dear me, no. Brown, the first thing tomorrow morning, you don't mind early hours, I know, Gregory. You must take the rector to there, you know." A nod from Brown, who looked grave and anxious. "And he and you will put that back. You needn't be the least alarmed. It's perfectly safe in the daytime. You know what I mean. It lies on the step, you know, where we put it." Brown swallowed dryly once or twice, and failing to speak, bowed. "And yes, that's all. Only this one other word, my dear Gregory. If you can manage to keep from questioning Brown about this matter, I shall still be more bound to you. Tomorrow evening at latest, If all goes well, I shall be able, I believe, to tell you the whole story from start to finish. And now I'll wish you good night. Bran will be with me. He sleeps here, and if I were you, I should lock the door. Yes, be particular to do that. They like it. The people here, and it's better. Good night, good night. They parted upon this, and if Mr. Gregory woke once or twice in the small hours and fancied he heard a fumbling about the lower part of his locked door, it was perhaps no more than what a quiet man, suddenly plunged into a strange bed and in the heart of a mystery, might reasonably expect. Certainly, he thought, to the end of his days, that he had heard such a sound twice or three times between midnight and dawn. He was up with the sun, and out in company with Brown soon after. Perplexing as was the service he had been asked to perform for Mr. Somerton, it was not a difficult or an alarming one, and within half an hour from his leaving the inn it was over. What it was I shall not as yet divulge. Later in the morning, Mr. Somerton, who was almost himself again, was able to make a start from Steinfeld, and that same evening, whether at Coblentz or at some intermediary stage on the journey, I am not certain, he settled down to the promised explanation. Brown was present, and how much of the matter was ever really made plain to his comprehension he would never say, and I am unable to conjecture. Excuse him. 3. This was Mr. Somerton's story. You know roughly, both of you, that this expedition of mine was undertaken with the object of tracing something in connection with some old painted glass in Lord D.'s private chapel. Well, the starting point of the whole matter lies in this passage from an old printed book, to which I will ask your attention. At this point, Mr. Somerton went carefully over some old ground with which we are already familiar. On my second visit to the chapel, he went on, my purpose was to take every note I could of figures, lettering, diamond scratchings on the glass, and even apparently accidental markings. The first point which I tackled was that of the inscribed scrolls. I could not doubt that the first of these, that of Job, there is a place for the gold where it is hidden, was intentional in its alteration, must refer to the treasure, so I applied myself with some confidence to the next, that of St. John. They have on their vestures a writing which no man knoweth. The natural question will have occurred to you. Was there an inscription on the robes of the figures? I could see none. Each of the three had a broad black border to his mantle, which made a conspicuous and rather ugly feature in the window. I was nonplussed, I will own, and but for a curious bit of luck, I think I should have left the search where the canons of Steinfeld had left it before me. But it so happened that there was a good deal of dust on the surface of the glass, and Lord D, happening to come in, noticed my blackened hands, and kindly insisted on sending for a Turk's head broom to clean down the window. There must, I suppose, have been a rough piece in the broom. Anyhow, as it passed over the barrier of one of the mantels, I noticed that it left a long scratch, and that some yellow stain instantly showed up. I asked the man to stop his work for a moment and ran up the ladder to examine the place. The yellow stain was there, sure enough, and what had come away was a thick black pigment, which had evidently been laid on with the brush after the glass had been burnt, and could therefore be easily scraped off without doing any harm. I scraped accordingly, and you will hardly believe, no, I do you an injustice, you will have guessed already, that I found under this pigment 2 or 3 clearly formed capital letters in yellow stain on a clear ground. Of course, I could hardly contain my delight. I told Lord D that I detected an inscription which I thought might be interesting, and begged to be allowed to uncover the whole of it. He made no difficulty about it whatever, told me to do exactly as I pleased, and then, having an engagement, was obliged, rather to my relief I must say, to leave me. I set to work at once, and found the task a fairly easy one. The pigment disintegrated, of course, by time, came off almost at a touch, and I don't think that it took me a couple of hours all told to clean the whole of the black borders in all three lights. Each of the figures had, as the inscription said, a writing on their vestures which nobody knew. This discovery, of course, made it absolutely certain to my mind that I was on the right track, and now it was the inscription. While I was cleaning the glass, I almost took pains not to read the lettering, saving up the treat until I had got the whole thing clear. And when that was done, my dear Gregory, I assure you I could have almost cried from sheer disappointment. What I read was only the most hopeless jumble of letters that was ever shaken up in a hat. Here it is. The ones on Job. DREVIMOOMSMVIVLISLCAVIBASBATAOVT. The ones on St. John. RDIIAMRLESIPVSPODSEEIRSETTAESGIA The ones on Zechariah. FTEEAILN, QDPVAIVM, TLEEATTOHQE. Blank as I felt and must have looked for the first few minutes, my disappointment didn't last long. I realized almost at once that I was dealing with a cipher or a cryptogram, and I reflected that it was likely to be of a simple kind, considering its early date. So I copied the letters with the most anxious care. Another little point, I may tell you, turned up in the process which confirmed my belief in the cipher. After copying the letters on Job's robe, I counted them to make sure that I had them right. There were 38, and just as I had finished going through them, my eye fell on a scratching made with a sharp point on the edge of the border. It was simply the number 38 in Roman numerals. To cut the matter short, there was a similar note, as I may call it, in each of the other lights, and that made it plain to me that the glass painter had very strict orders from Abbot Thomas about the inscription, and had taken pains to get it correct. Well, after that discovery, you may imagine how minutely I went over the whole surface of the glass in search of further light. Of course, I did not neglect the inscription on the scroll of Zechariah, "Upon one stone are 7 eyes," but I very quickly concluded that this must refer to some mark on a stone which could only be found in situ, where the treasure was concealed. To be short, I made all possible notes and sketches and tracings, and then came back to Parsbury to work out the cipher at leisure. Oh, the agonies I went through! I thought myself very clever at first, for I had made sure that the key would be found in some of the old books on secret writing. The Steganographia of Joachim Trithmius, who was an earlier contemporary of Abbot Thomas, seemed particularly promising. So I got that, and Silenus's Cryptographia, and Bacon's De Augmentis Scientiarum, and some more. But I could hit upon nothing. Then I tried the principle of the most frequent letter, taking first Latin and then German as a basis. That didn't help either. Whether it ought to have done so, I am not clear, and then I came back to the window itself and read over my notes, hoping almost against hope that the abbot might himself have supplied somewhere the key I wanted. I could make nothing out of the color or pattern of the robes. There were no landscape backgrounds with subsidiary objects. There was nothing in the canopies. The only resource possible seemed to be in the attitudes of the figures. Job, I read, scroll in left hand, forefinger of right hand extended upwards. John holds inscribed book in left hand, with right hand blesses with 2 fingers. Zechariah, scroll in left hand, right hand extended upwards as Job, but with three fingers pointing up. In other words, I reflected, Job has one finger extended, John has two, Zechariah has three. May not there be a numerical key concealed in that? My dear Gregory, said Mr. Summerton, laying his hand on his friend's knee, that was the key. I didn't get it to fit at first, but after 2 or 3 trials I saw what was meant. After the first letter of the inscription, you skip 1 letter. After the next, you skipped 2, and then after that, skip 3. Now look at the result I got. I've underlined letters which form words. D, E, C, E, M, M, I, L, L, I, A, V, R, I, R, E, P, O, S, I, T, A, S, V, N, T, I, N, P, V, T, E, O, I, N, A, T. Do you see it? Decimilia ore reposita sunt in puteo inat. 10,000 pieces of gold are laid up in a well in, followed by an incomplete word beginning at. So far, so good. I tried the same plan with the remaining letters, but it wouldn't work, and I fancy that perhaps the placing of dots after the last 3 letters might indicate some difference of procedure. Then I thought to myself, wasn't there some allusion to a well in the account of Abbot Thomas in that book, the Certum? Yes, there was. He built a puteus in atrio, a well in the court. There, of course, was my word, atrio. The next step was to copy out the remaining letters of the inscription, omitting those I had already used. That gave you what you will see on this slip. RVIIOPDOOSMVVISCA VBSBTAOTDIEA MLSIV SPD EER SET AEGIA NRFEEAL QDVA IMLEATTHOOVMCAHQE. Now, I knew what the first 3 letters I wanted were, namely Rio to complete the word atrio, and as you will see, these are all to be found in the first 5 letters. I was a little confused at first by the occurrence of 2 I's, but very soon I saw that every alternate letter must be taken in the remainder of the inscription. You can work it out for yourself. The result, continuing where the first round left off, is this. Rio domus abbatialis de Steinfeld a me, toma qui posui, custotum supere, gere aquila tusce. So the whole secret was out. 10,000 pieces of gold are laid up in the well in the court of the abbot's house of Steinfeld, by me, Thomas, who have set a guardian over them. Gare l'aquila tusce. The last words, I ought to say, are a device which Abbot Thomas had adopted. I found it with his arms on another piece of glass at Lord D's, and he drafted it bodily into his cipher, though it doesn't quite fit in point of grammar. Well, what would any human being have been tempted to do, my dear Gregory, in my place? Could he have helped setting off as I did to Steinfeld and tracing the secret literally to the fountainhead? I don't believe he could. Anyhow, I couldn't, and as I needn't tell you, I found myself at Steinfeld, as soon as the resources of civilization could put me there, and installed myself in the inn you saw. I must tell you that I was not altogether free from forebodings, on one hand of disappointment, on the other of danger. There was always the possibility that the Abbot Thomas's well might have been wholly obliterated, or else that someone, ignorant of cryptograms, and guided only by luck, might have stumbled on the treasure before me. And then there was a very perceptible shaking of the voice here. I was not entirely easy. I need not mind confessing as to the meaning of the words about the guardian of the treasure, but if you don't mind, I'll say no more about that until it becomes necessary. At the first possible opportunity, Brown and I began exploring the place. I had naturally represented myself as being interested in the ruins of the abbey, and we could not avoid paying a visit to the church, impatient as I was to be elsewhere. Still, it did interest me to see the windows where the glass had been, and especially that at the east end of the south aisle. In the tracery lights of that I was startled to see some fragments and coats of arms remaining. Abbot Thomas's shield was there, and a small figure with a scroll inscribed, Oculos habent, et non videbunt. They have eyes and shall not see, which I take it was a hit of the canon, was a hit of the abbot at his canons. But of course, the principal object was to find the abbot's house. There is no prescribed place for this, as far as I know, in the plan of a monastery. You can't predict of it, as you can of the chapter house, that it will be on the eastern side of the cloister, or as of the dormitory, that it will communicate with the transept of the church. I felt that if I had asked many questions, I might awaken lingering memories of the treasure, and I thought it best to try first to discover it for myself. It was not a very long or difficult search. That three-sided court southeast of the church, with deserted piles of building round it, and grass-grown pavement, which you saw this morning, was the place. And glad enough I was to see that it was put to no use, and was neither very far from our inn nor overlooked by any inhabited building. There were only orchards and paddocks on the slopes east of the church. I can tell you that fine stone glowed wonderfully in the rather weary yellow sunlight that we had on the Tuesday afternoon. Next, what about the well? There was not much doubt about that, as you can testify. It is really a very remarkable thing. That curb is, I think, of Italian marble, and the carving, I thought, must be Italian also. There were reliefs, you will perhaps remember, of Eliezer and Rebecca, and of Jacob opening the well for Rachel, and similar subjects, but by way of disarming suspicion, I suppose, the abbot had carefully abstained from any of his cynical and elusive inscriptions. I examined the whole structure with the keenest of interest. Of course, a square wellhead with an opening in one side, an arch over it with a wheel for the rope to pass over, evidently in very good use still. Very good condition still, for it had been used within 60 years, or perhaps even later, though not quite recently. Then there was the question of depth and access to the interior. I suppose the depth was about 60 to 70 feet. As to the other point, it really seemed as if the abbot had wished to lead searchers up to the very door of his treasure house, for, as you tested for yourself, there were big blocks of stone bonded into the masonry, and leading down an irregular staircase round and round the inside of the well. It seemed almost too good to be true. I wondered if there was a trap, if the stones were so contrived as to tip over when a weight was placed on them. But I tried a good many with my own weight and with my stick, and all seemed, and actually were, perfectly firm. Of course, I resolved that Brown and I would make an experiment that very night. I was well prepared, nor in this knowing the sort of place I should have to explore, I had brought a sufficiency of good rope and bands of webbing to surround my body, and crossbars to hold to, as well as lanterns and candles and crowbars, all of which would go into a single carpet bag and excite no suspicion. I satisfied myself that my rope would be long enough, and that the wheel for the bucket was in good working order, and then we went home to dinner. I had a little cautious conversation with the landlord, and made out that he would not be overmuch surprised if I went for a stroll with my man about 9 o'clock to make, heaven help me, a sketch of the abbey by moonlight. I asked no questions about the well, and am not likely to do so now. I fancy I know as much about it as anyone in Steinfeld, at least, with a strong shudder. I don't want to know more. Now we come to the crisis. And though I hate to think of it, I feel sure, Gregory, that it will be better for me in all ways to recall it just as it happened. We started, Brown and I at about 9 with our bag and attracted no attention, for we managed to slip out at the hinder end of the inn yard into an alley which brought us quite to the edge of the village. In 5 minutes we were at the well, and for some little time we sat on the edge of the wellhead to make sure that no one was stirring or spying on us. All we heard was some horses cropping grass out of sight farther down the eastern slope. We were perfectly unobserved, and had plenty of light from the gorgeous full moon to allow us to get the rope properly fitted over the wheel. Then I secured the band round my body beneath the arms. We attached the end of the rope very securely to a ring in the stonework. Brown took the lighted lantern and followed me. I had a crowbar, and so we began to descend cautiously, feeling every step before we set foot on it, and scanning the walls in search of any marked stone. Half aloud I counted the steps as we went down, and we got as far as the 38th before I noted anything at all irregular in the surface of the masonry. Even here there was no mark, and I began to feel very blank and to wonder if the abbot's cryptogram could possibly be an elaborate hoax. At the 49th step the staircase ceased. It was with a sinking heart that I began retracing my steps, and when I was back on the 38th, Brown, with the lantern being a step or two above me, I scrutinized a little bit of irregularity in the stonework with all my might, but there was no vestige of a mark. Then it struck me that the texture of the surface looked just a little smoother than the rest, or at least in some way different. It might possibly be cement and not stone. I gave it a good blow with my iron bar. There was a decidedly hollow sound, though that might be the result of our being in a well. But there was more. A great flake of cement dropped onto my feet, and I saw marks on the stone underneath. I had tracked the abbot down, my dear Gregory. Even now I think of it with a certain pride. I took but a very few more taps to clear the whole of the cement away, and I saw a slab of stone about 2 feet square, upon which was engraven a cross. Disappointment again, but only for a moment. It was you, Brown, who reassured me by a casual remark. You said, if I remember right, "It's a funny cross, looks like a lot of eyes." I snatched the lantern out of your hand and saw with inexpressible pleasure that the cross was composed of 7 eyes, 4 in a vertical line, 3 horizontal. The last of the scrolls in the window was explained in the way I had anticipated. Here was my stone with the 7 eyes. So far, the abbot's data had been exact, and as I thought of this, the anxiety about the guardian returned upon me, in increased force. Still, I wasn't going to retreat now. Without giving myself time to think, I knocked away the cement all round the marked stone, and then gave it a prise on the right side with my crowbar. I moved at once, and I saw that it was but a thin, light slab, such as I could easily lift out myself, and that it stopped the entrance to a cavity. I did lift it out unbroken, and set it on the step, for it might be very important to us to be able to replace it. Then I waited for several minutes on the step just above. I don't know why, but I think to see if any dreadful thing would rush out. Nothing happened. Next, I lit a candle, and very cautiously I placed it inside the cavity, with some idea of seeing whether there was foul air, and of getting a glimpse of what was inside. There was some foulness of air which nearly extinguished the candle, but in no time it burned quite steadily. The hole went some little way back, and also on the right and left of the entrance, and I could see some rounded light-colored objects within which might be bags. There was no use in waiting. I faced the cavity, and looked in. There was nothing immediately in the front of the hole. I put my arm in and felt to the right, very gingerly. Well, I felt to the right, and my fingers touched something curved, and that felt, yes, more or less like leather. Dampish it was, and evidently part of a heavy, full thing. There was nothing, I must say, to alarm one. I grew bolder, and putting both hands in as well as I could, I pulled it to me, and it came. It was heavy, but moved more easily than I had expected. As I pulled it towards the entrance, my left elbow knocked over and extinguished the candle. I got the thing fairly in front of the mouth and began drawing it out. Just then Brown gave a sharp ejaculation and ran quickly up the steps with the lantern. He will tell you why in a moment. Startled as I was, I looked round after him and saw him stand for a minute at the top and then walk away a few yards. Then I heard him call, "All right, sir," and when I'm pulling out the great bag in complete darkness, it hung for an instant on the edge of the hole, then slipped forward onto my chest and put its arms round my neck. My dear Gregory, I am telling you the exact truth. I believe I am now acquainted with the extremity of terror and repulsion which a man can endure without losing his mind. I can only just manage to tell you now the bare outline of the experience. I was conscious of a most horrible smell of mold and of a cold kind of face pressed against my own and moving slowly over it, and of several, I don't know how many, legs or arms or tentacles or something clinging to my body. I screamed out, Brown says, like a beast, and fell away backward from the step on which I stood, and the creature slipped downwards, I suppose, on to that same step. Providentially, the band round me held firm. Brown did not lose his head, and was quick enough to pull me up to the top and get me over the edge quite promptly. How he had managed it exactly I don't know, and I think he would find it hard to tell you. I believe he contrived to hide our implements in the deserted building nearby. With very great difficulty, he got me back to the inn. I was in no state to make explanations, and Brown knows no German, but next morning I told the people some tale of having had a bad fall in the Abbey ruins, which I suppose they believed. And now, before I go further, I should just like to hear what Brown's experience during those few minutes were. Tell the rector, Brown, what you've told me. Well, little sir, it was just this way. Master was busy down in front of the hole, and I was holding the lantern looking up, and I heard something drop in the water from the top, as I thought. So I looked up, and I see someone's head looking over at us. Suppose that must have said something. And I held the light up and run up the steps, and my light shone right in the face. It was the baddest sir I've ever seen one. A holdish man, and the face very much fell in, and laughing as I thought, and I got up the steps as quick pretty nigh, as I'm telling you, and when I was out on the ground there weren't a sign of any person. There hadn't been a time for anyone to get away, let alone hold chap. And I made sure he weren't crouching down by the well or nothing. The next thing I hear Master crying out something horrible, and all I see was him hanging out by the rope, and his master says, however, I got him up, however I got him up, I couldn't tell you. You hear that, Gregory? Said Mr. Somerton. Now, does any explanation of that incident strike you? The whole thing is so ghastly and abnormal that I must own it puts me quite off balance. But the thought did occur to me that possibly the person who set the trap might have come to see the success of his plan. Just so, Gregory, just so. I can think of nothing else so likely. I should say, if such a word had a place anywhere in my story. I think it must have been the abbot. Well, I haven't much more to tell you. I spent a miserable night, Brown sitting up with me. Next day I was no better, unable to get up, no doctor to be had, and if one had been available, I doubt he could have done much for me. And I made Brown write off to you, and spent a second horrible night. And Gregory, of this I am sure, and I think it affected me more than the first shock, for it lasted longer. There was someone or something on the watch outside my door the whole night. I almost fancy there were two. It wasn't only the faint noises I heard from time to time all through the dark hours, but there was the smell. The hideous smell of mold. Every rag I had on me that first evening I had stripped off and made Brown take away. I believe he stuffed the things into the stove in his room, and yet the smell was still there, as intense as it had been in the well, and what is more, it came from outside the door. But with the first glimmer of dawn it faded out, and the sound ceased too, and that convinced me that the thing or things were creatures of darkness and could not stand the daylight, and so I was sure that if anyone could put back the stone, it or they would be powerless until someone else took it away again. I had to wait until you came to get that done. Of course, I couldn't send Brown to do it by himself, and still less could I tell anyone who belonged to the place. Well, there is my story, and if you don't believe it, I can't help it, but I think you do. Indeed, said Mr. Gregory, I can find no alternative. I must believe it. I saw the well and the stone myself, and had a glimpse, I thought, of the bags or something else in the hole. And to be plain with you, Somerton, I believe my door was watched last night, too. I dare say it was, Gregory, but thank goodness that is over. Have you, by the way, anything to tell about your visit to that dreadful place? Very little, was the answer. Brown and I managed easily enough to get the slab into its place, and he fixed it very firmly with the irons and wedges you had desired him to get. And we contrived to smear the surface with mud so that it looks just like the rest of the wall. One thing I did notice in the carving on the wellhead, which I think must have escaped you. It was a horrid grotesque shape, perhaps more like a toad than anything else, and there was a label by it inscribed with two words, Depositum Custodi. Keep that which is committed to thee. Fuck, I'm creeped out now. Goddamn. Okay. Thanks for watching. Oh boy. So crazy. Really is fucking wild. No, yeah, I'm really surprised. I mean, it's one of those stories that, of course, oh, whatever. Fucking. Bye.